Um, Sometimes I quote people that aren't part of the church, but there's a purpose for it, and sometimes you find wisdom in words. And the one phrase that I'm going to quote from comes from the Nobel Prize winner in literature about 3 years ago. His name is Robert Zimmerman from Minnesota. He's an American from Minnesota, and you probably know him better as Bob Dylan, the singer Bob Dylan, who's been around for 60 years. And he wrote a song and recorded a song many years ago called "You Have to Serve Somebody." You've got to serve somebody. And he says in the song, it may be the devil or it may be the Lord. You have to serve somebody. And that's what I want to talk about today. I've talked before of how I visited Thessaloniki many years ago, and I've been there twice at least, and visited the Church of St. Demetrios, the mother church, I guess, of all the churches named St. Demetrios, and visited underneath the church where they've preserved the place where St. Demetrios met his martyrdom. Quite a moving experience, as I said before, to be there and to chant the Apolitikion to St. Demetrios, right in the spot, at the spot where he left this earth. Now, St. Demetrios, as you probably saw in the Synaxaria, in the write-up in the bulletin there, you have to understand, it wasn't just a martyr for Christ. St. Demetrios maybe would have been known to us, but St. Demetrios held a very high position in the world. He was an officer in the Roman army. The Roman Empire at that time was almost at its peak. It was at its peak. And so the other thing about the Roman Empire, of course, was that it wasn't safe to be a Christian. Okay? But as you read there, St. Demetrios was pious from the beginning by his parents or from his parents. He embraced Christ as a child because his parents had, and that he also engaged in teaching. Let me just do something here. Let me just pick this up so I don't drop it. He also engaged in teaching of the gospel of Christ to the faithful in Thessaloniki, and did so secretly, despite his great position. It was a crime. It was a capital crime to do so in Roman times in the late 3rd century. It was a crime certainly during Ottoman times when the Greek people and many others in the area of the Balkans and the Mediterranean were under the yoke of a foreign power who did not recognize Christ. There was a crime, of course, during Soviet times, the Soviet Union, where many faithful, many of the priests, bishops, were imprisoned or executed. And in some places in the world, today, it is still a crime. But what about us? What about us here in the West, especially here in the United States? We've been turning on our television sets or going online and have seen images of violence, civil disorder, and even outright attacks on anything that is traditional or which symbolizes order, symbolizes something that is sustained people for years. And this includes open attacks on churches and occasionally on some of the people who defend those churches, and on clerics, on priests, on ministers, and many of the faithful here in the United States. As Metropolitan Nicholas reminded us last night, as if we needed reminding, people are afraid to speak the truth. People are afraid. And in the gospel reading today, we hear Christ talk about this exact kind of hate. Αλλά έρχεται ώρα ή να πας ou αποκτήνεσιμάς δόξη λατρείαν προσφέρειν το Θεό. The hour is coming when whoever kills you will think he is offering service to God. Which God are we talking about that asks people to do that to show that they love him? Well, we know that for many of the non-Christian religions this might be true. We also have a more disturbing trend. And there are those who, while not offering service to God, are offering service to a God. Not God as we know him, but to a God. Now, who is that God? Recently, I was sent a link, and on YouTube there was a video of a city council meeting in California, and they had invited, or somebody had invited, an atheist to give the opening prayer. Now, who does an atheist pray to? It just boggles the mind. Now, the mayor and half the city council walked out. They weren't going to stay there. And I listened to this gentleman. And I know people who don't believe. I know atheists. I know some people who don't believe or who have doubts. Some of them are very nice people. And they don't get in your face about it. If you don't believe, you don't believe. But you also don't attack somebody who does. In fact, this whole term about militant atheism is a contradiction. How could you be militant in fighting something you don't believe in? It doesn't make sense to me. Anyways, this gentleman invoked a prayer to Mother Earth and went through all sorts of names through history, great philosophers, some religious figures, including Jesus, but just as he was a nice guy, whatever. And he praised secularism and humanism and science and being good for the sake of goodness. Okay? All right, fine. Being good for the sake of goodness. And that presumes that as human beings, we always know what that goodness is. That we always know. But as we have said, and you've heard this phrase, one man's meat is another man's poison. What is good for me at this point might not be good for you. What was good for Adolf Hitler was not good for millions of others. That kind of good is relative. And there's only one absolute good, and that is God, and that is Christ. But this wasn't the point here. I mean, as I said before, why do some people just rail against something they don't believe in? Going back to Bob Dylan, you have to serve somebody. Could be the devil, or it could be the Lord. Those who don't serve God as we know him, as we worship him, still serve a God. They worship a God. It could be the state, country, communism, socialism, capitalism, even that, secularism, humanism, all these isms. And these are all ideas. How do you worship an idea? How do you show love to an idea? Where do all of these end up? As Christ reminds us, he who hates him hates the Father who sent him. St. Demetrios didn't serve an idea. He served the Roman state, yes, but he served something far greater, and it wasn't an idea. He served and was martyred for that loving God for that living God, Christ, the only reality in our lives and in our universe. May he serve as an example to us. May he be the reminder that whatever the world throws at us, that Christ is the victor and that the ultimate victory belongs to him. May Christ, our true God, through the prayers of the Theotokos and of his mighty champion, St. Demetrios, our patron, have mercy on us and save us. Amen.